Not because I am ashamed of it, though I am. Not because I was punished for it, though I was. I want to be precise because the moment I threw that punch, I thought I was ending something. I was wrong. I was beginning something.
Your
and understanding
resistance
the
is
difference
futile.
between those two
I am
things
coming
cost
for
me
you.
everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Zarak,
The anomaly is
third-caste
expanding.
warrior of
We
the
must
Talon
reroute.
Empire,
Rerouting
former
power.
top
Shields are at
graduate of the
critical.
Talon War
Acknowledged.
College.
Move to the bridge.
And for a
The
brief
anomaly in
and
Sector 7 is
humiliating period
unpredictable.
of my
We must
life,
proceed with
the
caution.
cadet
Understood, but the mission
responsible for
timeline's
cleaning
critical. We
waste
can't delay.
recyclers on
Agreed.
levels 7,
Monitor
8,
closely.
and 9 of Iron Spire Station. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start where everything started the day I arrived. Iron Spire Station hung in the void between two dying stars, which I always thought was appropriate. Everything that happened inside it felt like something caught between two forces pulling in opposite directions. The station was enormous. Older than most empires, its outer hull bore scorch marks from conflicts so ancient even the historians had stopped arguing about who started them. It smelled even through the filtration systems like metal under pressure, and the kind of tension that builds in a room full of people who all believe they are the most dangerous one present. I stepped off the transport with 15 kilograms of equipment and the absolute certainty that I belonged here more than anyone else. I had reasons for this certainty. I had graduated first in my class at the War College. My tactical simulation scores were in the top 2% of all Talon cadets in the last 40 years. My crest, the ridge of bioluminescent tissue running from the crown of my skull to the base of my neck, had been described by 3 separate combat instructors as displaying the most disciplined color control they had ever observed in a student. In our culture, crest discipline is everything. It means you do not let the world see what you are feeling until you choose to show it. It means you are in control. I was always in control. I repeated this to myself as I navigated the crowded corridor of the main dormitory level. 47 different species moving around me, in every direction, the air thick with 17 languages spoken simultaneously. I had studied most of them. I was prepared. I was ready. Then someone walked into me. Not hard, not aggressively. Just the careless collision of someone not paying attention, a shoulder against my arm, a brief disruption of my stride. In Talon culture, bumping into a senior cadet without immediate formal apology constitutes a minor but real social transgression. The hierarchy is not a suggestion. It is the architecture that holds everything together. I stopped. I turned. She was human. Medium height, dark hair pulled back in that style they call a ponytail, which has always struck me as a strange thing to name a hairstyle after a prey animal's hindquarters. Her uniform was standard issue, still crisp from the transport, and the name tag on her chest read Thane M. She had a data pad under one arm and the expression of someone whose mind was 3 conversations ahead of her body. She looked at me, she smiled. Not the careful, calibrated smile of someone managing a social mistake. Not the wide, overcorrected smile of someone genuinely alarmed. Just a smile. Easy. Uncomplicated. "Sorry about that," she said. Her voice carried the cadence of someone accustomed to navigating unfamiliar territory without visible stress. "These corridors. First day right, chaos." She said it like we were on the same side of something. "You should exercise greater spatial awareness," I said. "Absolutely," she said. She meant it. I could tell she genuinely agreed with me, but the way she said it contained not one molecule of deference. Then she nodded, adjusted the data pad under her arm, and walked away. I stood in the corridor and watched her go. My crest flickered amber before I controlled it back to neutral. She had not apologized. Not really. She had acknowledged the collision, agreed with my correction, and continued as if the entire interaction had been between 2 people of equal standing. I checked the color coding on her uniform tag. First cycle, newly arrived. I told myself she was simply ignorant of proper protocol. I told myself it did not matter. I believed both of these things for approximately 6 hours before I pulled up her academy intake file. Her name was Myra Thane, 23 years old, Earthborn, previous service record, and this was where I stopped reading and started over from the beginning because I had clearly made an error. I had not made an error. 16 confirmed field engagements before academy enrollment, 5 of them classified, 3 commendations for tactical improvisation under fire, 1 medical discharge incomplete, annotated with the phrase, "Return to active status ahead of projected timeline." Her combat evaluation from the Earth military described her striking velocity as consistently above documented human average, and her threat assessment ability as anomalous recommend advanced placement. I read the file 3 times. Then I sat in my dormitory in the dark and thought about the way she had smiled at me. Not afraid, not impressed, not performing any social role at all, just present. Like the collision had been interesting to her, like I had been interesting to her in the way a new variable is interesting to someone who is very good at solving equations. My crest shifted toward a pale and certain green that my mother used to call the color of someone who does not yet know what to be afraid of. I forced it back to neutral. I closed the file. I told myself I had simply done due diligence on a fellow cadet. I believed this with approximately 40% of my available conviction. 2 weeks in Commander Areth's scheduled advanced combat theory. Areth was Calvarian, 4 upper limbs eye stalks that moved independently, and a patience that seemed geologically deep. He ran his classroom with calm, absolute authority, the manner of someone who had never needed to raise his voice because everyone already understood that disappointing him would be worse than anything a raised voice could convey. The topic that morning was the Corin suppression technique. If you are unfamiliar, the Corin suppression technique is one of the foundational close quarters protocols in galactic military doctrine, developed across 3,000 years of collective martial refinement by 17 different species. Elegant, precise, it accounts for 32 distinct physiological variables. Its 17-step execution sequence exists because, at some point in the last 3,000 years, the absence of each step caused someone to lose a fight they should have won. Areth was walking us through the third subsequence when Mirathane raised her hand. The room shifted, not dramatically, not obviously, but I felt it, the slight recalibration of attention that occurs when something unexpected enters a space. Cadet Thane, Areth said. Question about the 7th step, she said. She pulled up a holographic body diagram and highlighted a point at the base of the sternum. If you strike here at this angle with this vector of force, the target loses structural integrity in their core, regardless of species. One movement, it accomplishes what steps 4 through 11 are designed to accomplish sequentially. She paused. I'm not saying the technique is wrong. I'm asking why we use 17 steps when one might work. The silence that followed was a room deciding how to feel about something. I did not need to decide. I already knew. Your species, I said, has been traveling between stars for approximately 2 of our solar years. I let that settle. Perhaps the value of 3,000 years of collective refinement is not immediately apparent to a civilization that was still developing basic atmospheric flight when this technique was being codified. Several cadets shifted. A Hurix in the second row clicked its secondary mandibles in approving laughter. Mira looked at me. Not angry, not embarrassed. Something more precise than either. She looked at me the way you look at a problem you have already solved and are now watching someone else struggle with. Humanity has been in continuous warfare for approximately 10,000 years, she said. We fought each other across every continent with every technology from sharpened rocks to orbital weapons platforms, and we somehow kept producing more humans to continue fighting. We have been killing each other and surviving being killed for longer than most species in this room have had written language. She tilted her head slightly. I'm just saying we know a little about efficiency. Fighting with primitive weapons in a single gravity well is not equivalent to, you lost a border conflict to the Yevik Collective 11 years ago, she said. Quiet, not cruel, just a fact delivered with the precision of someone who had done their homework. 3-star systems and reparations. I read the historical record. I'm not bringing it up to be unkind. I'm bringing it up because the Corin suppression technique was the documented primary engagement protocol in that conflict, and it didn't win. The silence this time was different. Areth's eye stalks had retracted approximately 2 centimeters in Calvarian body language, the neurological equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. That is enough, he said, both of you. Save this energy for the combat trials. Dismissed early today. Use the time to reflect on the difference between critique and contribution. We filed out. In the corridor, I did not look at her. My crest was a color I will not describe. The combat trials came 3 weeks after arrival. I want to be honest about my state of mind going in. I had replayed the classroom exchange approximately 40 times. Each replay found new angles from which I had been correct and she had been out of line. Each certainty made me angrier in a way I was increasingly skilled at not showing. My first 3 matches were exactly what my training had prepared them to be. A Hurix cadet in 44 seconds, a Morphin in just over a minute, a Cellcrax who made the error of attempting a Venom Sac maneuver, which is both illegal in training conditions and anatomically incompatible with the counter-grapple position I had him in. Then the announcer called my 4th match. Cadet Zarek of Talonra versus Cadet Thane of Earth. Take your positions. Of course. She entered from the opposite side of the arena, with the unhurried quality of someone who had been here before, not this arena specifically, but this type of moment, the texture of standing in a marked space while others watched. She rolled her shoulders once, settled into a stance that was loose in a way I initially read as casual, and then immediately revised to controlled. There is a difference. I know the difference. I had just never seen it look quite like that. She carried her shock baton at a low angle. She did not smile. That should have told me something. The buzzer sounded. I led with a classic opening high feint to draw the guard up, low sweep to destabilize follow-through to the center line. It had worked on every training partner I had faced at the War College. It was efficient, calibrated, nearly perfect. She wasn't there. The sidestep was so fast I registered it as an absence rather than a movement. One moment there was a target in front of me, and then there was empty air, and then there was an impact against my lower back precise enough to tell me she had not swung wild. She had chosen exactly where to hit me. I stumbled forward. I turned. She was in the same loose stance baton, at low angle, her expression doing nothing in particular. I attacked again, and again. I varied the patterns, alternating high and low, switching approach angles, testing her response time with short commitment probes before full engagement. For every variation, she had an answer. Not an elaborate one, not showy, just the minimum necessary movement to avoid being hit and maintain position. She never overcorrected. She never gave me an opening by committing to a counter. She was doing what she had done in the classroom, the minimum necessary engagement, enough to deflect, nothing extra. I was working very hard. She was barely working at all. Then I saw it, a fractional opening, her left side exposed for less than a second as she deflected my overhead strike. I pivoted. I brought the shock baton around in an arc with the highest probability of landing I had achieved in the entire match. She dropped, not away from it, under it. The sweep caught my legs, and the ground arrived with a speed that physics did not quite seem to justify. And then I was on my back with her shock baton resting against my throat and 47 species of cadet watching from the surrounding stands. Yeah, she said, not triumphant, not mocking, just a question. The question you ask when you want to confirm someone understands the situation. I understood the situation. I yield, I said. She offered me her hand. I looked at it for 2 seconds. Then I stood without taking it. Your combat style is undisciplined, I said. My voice was very level. Probably, she said. She shrugged. I still won. She walked away. I stood in the center of the arena. My crest was the color of a system going critical. That evening, I reviewed the match footage 4 times. I was looking for the error, the specific mechanical failure that had allowed the outcome, because there had to be one, some technical deficit, some correctable variable I could identify and eliminate. I found something else. In the first 3 seconds of the match before my opening feint, there was a brief moment where Mira shifted her weight slightly to the left. It was not a flinch. It was not a tell. It was a deliberate, barely perceptible invitation, her left side angled open by approximately 6 degrees more than neutral stance requires. For 3 seconds, then she corrected it, an invitation she had offered and withdrawn. She had been testing something, checking whether I would commit to an obvious opening, checking how I read information, checking what my instincts did when presented with a target that was slightly too available. And then once she had the information she came for, she had fought the rest of the match with the efficiency of someone who had already solved the problem and was now simply executing the solution. She had not been competing with me. She had been studying me. My mandibles clicked once the involuntary sound of a realization landing harder than expected. I closed the footage. In the silence of my dormitory, I made the decision that would change everything. Not the decision that seemed large at the time, not the challenge I would issue, not the punch I would throw. Those were consequences. The real decision was smaller, quieter. I decided I could not let this stand. Not because she had beaten me, not because she had embarrassed me, but because she had looked at me the way you look at something you are trying to understand, and I had not been able to make her stop. The worst thing in Talleyrand culture is not defeat. The worst thing is to be legible, to be read, to be a problem someone else is already solving. Mirathane was solving me. I could feel it, and I did not know how to make it stop. So I did what pride does when it runs out of better options. I picked a fight. 2 days later, the training gymnasium on level 4 mid-cycle. She was working through a solo combat routine, not the academy's standard forms, something else entirely with a rhythm and economy that was different from anything in the approved curriculum. She moved like someone who had spent a long time learning exactly how much energy each motion required and had cut everything else away. I watched her for longer than I intended before I said her name. She turned, saw me. Her expression shifted not to wariness exactly, but something adjacent to it. The alertness of someone who has done enough threat assessment to recognize a certain kind of energy when it walks through a door. Zarak, she said, neutral. I'm challenging you to an unsanctioned match, I said. Here, now. A pause. She looked at me with that quiet calculation, something being weighed. Unsanctioned means no supervision, she said. That's against regulations. We could both be expelled. Are you refusing? I'm trying to use basic judgment. The Talonran do not refuse challenges. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me with something in her expression I would not understand until much later. Not frustration, not anger, but something that looked almost like sadness. Like someone watching a predictable thing happen and being unable to stop it. Fine, she said, quiet. Training weapons, first touch wins. We took our positions. The gymnasium was empty, no announcer, no stands. Just two cadets in fluorescent emergency lighting and the silence that precedes a mistake. I had studied her. I had the footage. I knew her weight transfers, her preferred angles, the micro tells in her shoulder before a sidestep. 40 hours preparing for this exact encounter. We circled. She was not smiling, had not smiled since I walked in. I committed full power center mass and pivoted mid-strike when she sidestepped exactly as anticipated. My secondary attack connected with her shoulder blade. She spun with the impact. Not against it, with it. She used my own force as rotation, and her elbow came around faster than I had calculated was physically possible, and it connected with the side of my skull. The room became briefly unreliable. I staggered. My vision split and rejoined. I was still standing only because training had made standing a reflex. Stop, Mira said. Her voice was stripped of everything but urgency. Zarak, I tagged you, match is over. I heard her. I did not stop. What came next was not technique. It was not training. It was 3 weeks of accumulated anger and wounded pride and the humiliation of being studied like a problem, and it moved through me and out of my arm before I had finished deciding to let it. My fist, not the training baton, my actual fist connected with her cheekbone. The sound was wrong. Everything stopped. Mira caught my wrist with both hands. Not retaliating. Containing. The gymnasium doors opened, and Commander Areth's voice crossed the space like something with mass. Blood ran from above her left eye. I looked at what I had done. My crest went completely dark, every bioluminescent cell shutting down at once, the involuntary display of a mind that has just fully understood the magnitude of its own error. In 17 years of combat training, I had never struck an unprotected opponent with an unweaponed blow outside sanctioned combat. Not once. Mira released my wrist. She touched her face, looked at the blood on her fingers with the expression of someone confirming a hypothesis they had hoped would not be confirmed. Then she looked at me. And what I saw in her face, not anger, not pain, but something that looked almost like grief. The grief of watching something avoidable happen anyway broke something in me more completely than any match had. More completely than anything had. You really shouldn't have done that, she said. I know, but no sound came out. Areth was already crossing the room. I stood in the empty gymnasium in the silence of what I had just done and understood for the first time that I had not been fighting Mirathane at all. I had been fighting the version of myself that could not stand being known. And I had just lost that fight in the most complete way possible. Commander Areth's office smelled like recycled air and consequences. I had been in disciplinary offices before. At the War College twice. Both times I had walked out with my record intact and my certainty undisturbed. This was different. Areth sat behind his desk for a full minute without speaking. His eye stalks were still. When a Calvarian goes that still, it means they are not performing patience. They actually have it. They have all the time available and they are comfortable using it. Mira stood to my left. The medical officer had closed the cut above her eye with a tissue bond seal, a thin line of darker skin marking where I had split it. She stood at attention with the posture of someone who had made stillness into discipline. When Areth finally spoke, he said one word. Explain. Mira opened her mouth first. My fault, Commander. I accepted an unsanctioned challenge when I knew better. No excuse. I felt something shift in my chest. She was going to carry it, standing in this office with a sealed cut on her face that I had put there, and she was going to distribute blame evenly when the distribution was nowhere near even. She was doing it with the calm of someone who had made the calculation and accepted the outcome. I could let her. It would have been easy. My career was salvageable if the fault was shared. Very possibly finished if it was not. That is not accurate, I said. Areth's eye stalk turned toward me. I issued the challenge. Cadet Thane attempted to decline. I used cultural pressure to override her objection. The unsanctioned match was my instigation. The physical strike that caused her injury was my action. This is entirely my responsibility. The silence that followed had a different texture than the one before it. Areth looked at me for a long time, then at Mira, then at something above both our heads that seemed to be the general concept of what to do with two cadets who had just surprised him. Unsanctioned combat carries penalties ranging from formal reprimand to immediate expulsion, he said finally. Under standard protocol, you would both be processed out before the next rotation cycle. He paused. I am not going to do that. I did not allow myself to feel relief. It seemed premature. You are both assigned to joint disciplinary service. 3 months. Maintenance sanitation facility operations, cadet orientation support. You will report weekly. You will work together. You will submit written reflections to my office every 14 days. His eye stalk settled on me. Cadet Serac, this is the only warning you will receive. One more incident and you are gone. No appeal, no second conversation. Understood. Understood, Commander. Dismissed. We walked out. The corridor stretched ahead, long and fluorescent and brutally ordinary. I had just kept my career by the thinnest margin available. I was also aware of the woman walking beside me with a sealed cut above her eye, and the silence between us, not comfortable but not hostile. The silence of two people in the same situation who had not yet decided what to make of each other. I am sorry, I said, for all of it. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said, and for what it's worth, I pushed harder than I should have. Sometimes I forget not everyone grew up with the kind of testing I did. Testing, finding out what someone's made of. She glanced sideways. You're not what I expected. I did not know what to do with that. So I said nothing. We reached the fork where our corridors diverged, and she turned toward the human quarters, and I turned toward mine, and that was the end of the first day of what would become the 3 most disorienting months of my life. Level 7's waste recycler smelled like something had died inside it, decided it was comfortable, and invited friends. I stood at the access panel on the first morning and ran a brief internal inventory of every decision that had led me here. The list was not flattering. Mira was already elbow-deep in the secondary filtration housing, pulling out components with the focused efficiency of someone who had done worse things in worse conditions. She was wearing maintenance coveralls, hair tied back tighter than usual. She was inexplicably humming something. First time doing sanitation work, she asked, not looking up. Tullenran Warrior Caste does not typically. Yeah, she said. I figured. She handed me a filtration component, coded in something I chose not to identify, and pointed at the cleaning kit on the floor. I got to work. We did not talk much that first week. We fell into a rhythm that was mostly functional. She knew more about the physical mechanics of the station's systems than I expected, and I had better fine motor control for precision components, and together we were more efficient than either alone. We finished assignments ahead of schedule. We received no complaints from the maintenance supervisors. It was in the most stripped-down sense working. What I did not expect was Chief Bernard. He appeared on the 4th day, materializing from the direction of the atmospheric control hub with the unhurried confidence of someone whose relationship to this station was older and deeper than anyone else present. He was human, older than Mira by several decades, with the physical stillness of someone who had removed all unnecessary movement, every gesture precisely weighted, nothing extra. He looked at us both, assessed the situation in a single sweep, and held out 2 containers of something dark and steaming. You look like you could use this, he said. Mira's face did something I had not seen it do before. Not the controlled expression she wore in classrooms or arenas. Something unguarded, warm. Chief Brenner, she said, accepting the container. You are an actual legend. Just a man with coffee. He looked at me. You drink it. I took the container. The smell hit first, bitter, complex, strangely compelling in a way I did not trust. I took a careful sip. It tasted like someone had burned something important and decided to make the burning the point. This is, I searched for the word. Acquired taste, Bernard said. The corner of his mouth moved. I'll bring you Talonran spiced tea next time, the blue kind. I know what your people actually prefer. He said it without condescension, a statement of knowledge, not performance. The warmth of someone who had made it their business to understand the people around them. I drank the coffee and thought about what kind of person brings beverages to disciplinary cadets, scrubbing recyclers, and what that said about the difference between authority and power. That evening, I pulled up his file. I sat with it for a long time. Chief Bernard had retired from active command 8 years ago at the rank of Vice Admiral. He had commanded the defense of Kepler Station, a 47-hour engagement against a force 3 times his own with degraded communications, partial hull integrity, and a crew that had been awake for 30 hours before the first shot was fired. The engagement was studied at the War College. I had studied it. Not once had the curriculum mentioned the name of the officer who led it. He had requested his current posting, voluntary reassignment to maintenance operations. His reasoning filed officially was 3 sentences. Combat command is a skill. Infrastructure maintenance is a different skill. I would like to learn the second one. I read those 3 sentences 4 times. The concept of voluntary reduction in status for the purpose of learning was not part of my cultural framework. In Talonron society, you ascended or you were diminished. There was no lateral movement, no choosing to become smaller in one context in order to grow in another. The concept had no word in my language because my language had not imagined it was possible. I looked at the coffee container on my desk. I thought about a vice admiral who brought hot drinks to disciplinary cadets cleaning recyclers. I thought about a woman with 16 field engagements who introduced herself with a smile and an apology for bumping into someone in a hallway. Something solid in my understanding of things developed its first visible crack. Weeks passed. The work was hard and often unpleasant, and occasionally genuinely disgusting, and it taught me things no tactical simulation had ever suggested were worth knowing. I learned which atmospheric processors were most likely to fail during shift changes. I learned that the beings who kept the station running held the entire structure together through a combination of expertise and stubbornness that no combat rating would ever officially acknowledge. I learned their names. Mira had known their names from the second week. She had the particular human ability to make herself known to people in a way that felt mutual rather than strategic, not performing interest, but actually wanting to know the answer when she asked a question. I watched her do it and tried to understand the mechanism. It seemed to operate without calculation. It seemed to simply be something she was. In the 5th week, we were assigned to new cadet orientation. 24 recruits from across the Federation standing in the corridor of dormitory level 3, with the expression of beings trying very hard to look like they were not frightened. I recognized it. I had worn it myself, though I had worn it very quietly. We showed them the facilities, explained the protocols, answered questions. At one point, a small EX cadet raised a tentative appendage and asked whether the combat trials were as difficult as the rumor suggested. Yes, I said, you will lose some of them. What matters is what you do with the loss. Mira glanced at me. I did not look back at her, but I was aware of the glance the way you are aware of a sound you recognize, not startling, just present. A small confirmation of something. Afterward, walking back through the maintenance levels, she said, you were good with them. They were frightened, I said. Frightened cadets who are told the truth early learn faster than those who are protected from it. That's a very practical way to describe being kind. I was not being kind. I was being efficient. Zarek, she said, and there was something in her voice I would have described if pressed as fond. Those are sometimes the same thing. I had no response to that. We walked in silence for a while. Then she said without preamble, my father was in the military 20 years. He saw action on 4 continents. I waited. He came home with a bad knee and this thing he did whenever something went wrong, some plan that fell apart, or a situation that got harder than expected, he'd say, good. Now I know where the problem actually is. She was quiet for a moment. I was 18 before I understood he actually meant it. What changed at 18? First real deployment. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. I thought about that for a long time. On the morning of the 6th week, Chief Brennar found us at the beginning of our shift. He was carrying 2 containers coffee as usual, but also a third one smaller filled with something blue and fragrant that I recognized before he held it out. Sova tea. Talonron spice blend. The real kind, not the synthetic approximation sold in the station canteen. Told you I'd bring it, he said simply. I held the container for a moment. The smell was so familiar, it felt displaced, something from home existing in a place that had felt until recently like the opposite of home. Where did you find this? I asked. Supply freighter came through 3 days ago. Talonran crew. I asked nicely. He shrugged in the way that means the effort was significant and the shrug is a choice. Seemed like the right week for it. I drank the tea. Bernard drank his coffee. Mira drank hers and watched the 2 of us with an expression I was learning to read as quiet satisfaction, the look of someone watching pieces move into positions she had hoped they would reach. That small moment, unremarkable by any formal measure, was the first time Ironspire Station felt like somewhere I actually was, rather than somewhere I was trying to prove myself. The incident happened in the 10th week. We were on security patrol, level 4 recreational sector midway through a quiet evening shift. Then we heard voices from one of the training rooms, and the quality of those voices, one high with fear, several low with intent, was something both of us recognized before we reached the observation window. Cadet Vrek had Cadet Prith against the wall. Vrek was Korin, 3 years senior, broad across the upper body, with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to the power that comes from making others afraid without formal effort. 2 associates stood at angles that were not accidental. They had done this before. They knew how to position themselves. Prith was Pelverian. Small, precise, delicate manipulator arms pressed flat against the wall. His face showed the quality of fear that is trying very hard to look like something else. Give us the datapad, Rek was saying. We know you have next week's exam solutions stored. We just want to look. We just want to look. Mira's hand was already moving toward the door panel. 3 senior cadets, I said quietly. They outrank us. Our credibility is compromised. This could end badly. She looked at me, not asking permission, just checking, seeing what I was going to do. And I felt it then clearly for the first time the difference between the gymnasium and this moment. In the gymnasium, I had been fighting for something I wanted to protect my pride, my image, my sense of being unreadable. Here, there was someone who needed help that only we could provide, and the question was not whether I was strong enough to intervene, but whether I was the kind of being who did. Let's go, I said. We went in. Vrek turned, assessed us with the confidence of someone who had done the math and liked the numbers. Disciplinary cases, he said. Walk away before you add to your problems. Step back from the cadet, Mira said. Her voice was level and final, the voice of someone who has already decided and is now informing others of what has been decided. Or what? Step back. Vrek moved faster than his size suggested. The strike he threw at Mira was not full force, the particular blow of someone establishing dominance without formal consequence, designed to connect and send a message. Mira caught his wrist. The joint lock she applied was not from the Academy's approved curriculum. Not from any curriculum I had studied. Something older and more economical, and Vrek's expression moved from confidence to pain to shock in approximately 2 seconds. His associates moved. The one who came at me, a Hurix with 4 arms, led with his upper right strike. I blocked, rolled my shoulder into his center line, and used the mandible snap technique that my instructors had always called my strongest close-range tool. He reeled. I kept him contained without escalating. The third associate stopped. He looked at the room. Vrek locked his partner, reeling Mira immovable Prith, no longer against the wall, and he made a rapid correct assessment. He did not move again. The gymnasium doors opened. Everyone freeze. Commander Areth. Behind him, Chief Bernard stood with a datapad in his hand, and the expression of someone who had been watching the security monitors, seen what was about to happen, and made a phone call. I learned later that he had started recording the moment Vrek cornered Prith, that he had contacted Areth before we even reached the observation window, that the entire intervention had unfolded inside a safety net Brennar had constructed before we knew we would need it. Vrek was escorted out. Areth looked at us. My office, he said, 15 minutes. Prith touched Mira's arm before we left. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Walking toward Areth's office, Mira looked straight ahead for a long time. Then you didn't hesitate? You didn't either, I said. I never do when someone needs help. She glanced at me. You used to. I thought about that. About the gymnasium, the wounded pride, the calculation of personal costs running beneath every decision I had made in those first weeks. Something changed, I said. Yeah, she said. It did. She did not say it like a compliment. She said it like a fact she had been waiting to confirm. The way you confirm a hypothesis you had good reason to believe, but needed to see demonstrated before you could be certain. I stood up straight. I walked in. Areth's office was the same as before. Same recycled air, same desk, same patience in the way he occupied his chair. But something in the room was different, and it took me a moment to identify what it was. He was not pacing. He looked at us for a long time. Then he said, when I assigned you this duty, I expected one of 2 outcomes. You would complete it, learn nothing, and return to your training as the same cadets you were before. Or you would fail and I would process you out before the end of the first month. He paused. I did not anticipate a third outcome. Neither of us spoke. Chief Brenner has submitted a commendation for both of you. The orientation staff describes your work with new recruits as among the most effective they have seen from cadets at your experience level. And tonight, he closed the security footage on his desk display. Tonight, you intervened in a situation that carried significant personal risk, with compromise standing against senior cadets on behalf of someone with no ability to reciprocate. He stood. Your disciplinary period is concluded effective immediately. Full reinstatement of Brennan status. All privileges restored. He touched the display. Additionally, I am entering formal commendations into both your records. Cadet Prith has submitted a personal statement requesting your actions be officially recognized. He looked at me. Cadet Zarek, your application to the Advanced Combat Instructor track has been approved. Cadet Thane, your application to the Tactical Analysis Program has been accepted. The room was quiet. You are dismissed. Get some sleep. We walked out. The corridor received us. We walked for a while without speaking, the station's ambient sounds moving around us. Distant machinery, ventilation, the faint, multilingual hum of hundreds of beings going about their evening. That actually just happened, Mira said. I believe so. We're not being expelled. Apparently not. She stopped walking. I stopped beside her. She looked at the middle distance with the expression of someone running a rapid internal check to confirm events were in the correct sequence. Then she laughed. Not performed, not social. The genuine laugh of someone whose body has decided to process relief through sound. I felt my mandibles do the thing they had been doing more frequently, the slight involuntary movement my people call a grace click, the physical equivalent of a smile which I had always controlled so automatically I had stopped noticing I was controlling it. I stopped controlling it. Get some sleep, I said, and the way I said it was different from how I would have said anything 3 months ago, and we both knew it, and neither of us made it a larger moment than it was. She nodded, turned toward her corridor. Zarak, she said, not turning back. Yes, you did good tonight. I had received more formally significant recognition in my life. Graduation honors, combat medals, instructor commendations with official ceremony and documentation. None of them had landed quite like those 4 words in a station corridor at the end of a shift. So did you, I said. She walked away. I stood there a moment longer than necessary. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had since arriving at Ironspire Station. 3 days later, Commander Areth called us back in. This time there was someone else in the room. She was Calvarian older than Areth, wearing the insignia of the Federal Security Council. Her eye stalks had the stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where information has weight and careless words have consequences. She introduced herself as Assessor Ven and explained with careful economy why we were there. Cadet Vrek, under questioning, had provided information. He had not acted alone. The harassment of Cadet Prith had been part of a larger pattern, not random bullying, but targeted pressure designed to produce an incident on record that could be used as evidence in a federal review of the Academy's integration policies. Specifically, the policies regarding humanity's full membership status in the Galactic Federation. There were members of the Federal Council who believed humanity's integration had been premature, who had been for the past several months accumulating a case. Mirathane had been selected as a focal point, not because she was the weakest human cadet, because she was the most visible. Her record, her background, her behavior at the Academy had been under observation since before she arrived. Every confrontation documented, every restraint noted, every interaction logged. Assessor Ven delivered this information with the tone of someone reading structural analysis, and I sat with it and understood with cold, comprehensive clarity the full shape of what I had been too proud to see. Mira had known. Not everything, not the specific names and council votes and documentation chains, but she had known she was being watched. She had known that every choice she made in this academy carried weight beyond her own career. She had known that losing control, retaliating when I deserved it, escalating when she had every right to, could hand powerful, patient people exactly the evidence they needed. She had taken a punch she could have avoided. I thought of the footage, the 0.3 seconds where she began to move and then stopped. I had watched it dozens of times trying to understand the mechanics. Now I understood the reason. It was not strategy in the cold calculating sense. It was something that had decided in the compressed moment before impact that my momentum toward destruction mattered more than her cheekbone. She had not done it because she was weak. She had done it because she understood that some fights are not the ones in front of you, and the only way to win them is to refuse to let them become the kind of fight your opponent wants. I looked at her across Areth's office. She was watching Assessor Ven with the attention I had seen on her face in the classroom, in the arena, in the gymnasium. That quiet, complete focus, the face of someone always simultaneously present and 3 steps ahead. She did not look back at me. She did not need to. Assessor Ven informed us that the council members involved were under formal investigation, that Rek's testimony combined with Chief Brennar's security footage had been sufficient to initiate a federal review, that humanity's membership status was not in question, and the review was expected to confirm this formally within the month. She closed her briefing case. Both of you, she said, behaved in ways that made this resolution possible. That is noted. She looked at Mira. Your restraint over a sustained period under significant provocation demonstrated something no formal argument could have. Evidence of character is the only evidence that cannot be fabricated. She left. The 3 of us, Areth, Mira, myself, sat in the quiet that follows a large thing being said in a small room. Then Areth said, "There is one more thing." He turned his desk display toward us. 6 months before either of you arrived at this academy, I received a psychological assessment from the Talonran War College. Cadet Zarak, your assessment flagged what our evaluators describe as a pride cascade vulnerability, a pattern in which the need to protect self-image overrides tactical judgment, escalates, and eventually produces an irreversible mistake. His eye stalk moved toward me. I have seen it before. In very talented cadets, it tends to end careers. I said nothing. I also received 3 months before the semester began a voluntary application. A cadet who had reviewed the incoming class profiles and identified a pairing she believed could produce a productive outcome. She wrote 4 pages outlining the psychological case for the assignment and requesting to be placed in the relevant proximity. He closed the display. The first quarter interaction on your first day was not an accident, Cadet Zarak. The room was very quiet. I turned to look at Mira. She met my eyes. Her expression held the quality of someone who has been waiting for a particular moment and is now finally in it. You read my file, I said. Your War College file, yes. Before we had ever met, before I arrived at Ironspire. And you decided that you needed someone who wouldn't fold, she said. Someone who would push back hard enough to make the cascade happen early in controlled conditions before it happened in the field where it would kill people. She held my gaze. I'm not sorry I did it. I'm sorry it hurt. I sat with that for a long moment. In Talonron culture, there is a concept for the debt owed to someone who does something costly for your benefit without being asked and without requiring acknowledgement and without calculating what they might receive in return. It is considered the highest form of debt because it cannot be repaid. It can only be carried. Thank you, I said. It was insufficient. We both knew it. I said it anyway because it was what I had. She nodded once. Ireth was very carefully looking at something on his desk display that he had definitely already read. We were dismissed. The team combat trials were scheduled 4 days later. I want to describe them accurately, not for drama, because accuracy matters, and what happened in that arena was the kind of moment that loses its meaning if you embroider it. The opposing pair was a Morin-Selkrax combination that had won the team trials 3 consecutive cycles. The Morin was fast and read angles exceptionally well. The Selkrax was slower but structurally imposing with a reach advantage that had ended 16 consecutive matches. Together, they operated with the fluid efficiency of a pairing that had trained together long enough to stop needing to communicate. Mira and I had 3 months of waste recyclers and one shared crisis, and the understanding that develops between people who have seen each other at their worst and chosen to be present anyway. The Federal Council Observers Gallery was occupied. Word of the ongoing investigation had not been made public, but certain interested parties were watching through legitimate channels. Mira had told me the night before briefly. They want to see us fail, she said. Then we won't, I said. She had looked at me with the expression I was learning to read as respect. Not performed, not encouraging. Just recognition, the specific look of someone who has updated their assessment of you and is acknowledging the update. The buzzer sounded. Mira went low, I went high. We had not rehearsed this. We did not need to. 3 months of moving through the same spaces, responding to the same situations, learning the rhythm of how the other person thinks, had built something with no formal name in any training manual. The Moran tracked me. Correct decision. I was the more aggressive target. He committed to a counter sequence that was technically excellent and well-timed, and in a one-on-one situation would have worked. Mira was already at his left flank before he completed the first step. He adjusted, split his attention, and the moment he split his attention was the moment the match changed. The cell cracks moved on Mira. She read it before I did some microsignal in its weight distribution she had observed and stored and redirected rather than blocked using its own momentum to create space. She called my name once, a single syllable, and I understood without explanation what she needed. I created the opening. It required moving into the Moran strike zone without a defensive position. It would hurt. It did hurt, the impact across my upper arms, significant, the kind of blow that would still be visible as a bruise at graduation. I moved through it and positioned myself and gave Mira the angle she needed. She ended the match in 2 strikes. The arena was quiet for a moment. Then it was not. We helped the Morin and the cell cracks to their feet. The Morin looked at me with an expression that was partly frustration and partly something more honest. You took that hit deliberately, he said. Yes. Why? I thought about how to answer that. About 3 months of slow, malodorous education. About a vice admiral who brought tea when he said he would. About a woman who read a stranger's psychological file and decided to do something costly and unrequested. Because it was the right move, I said. He nodded. We were warriors. The language of deliberate cost in service of a larger objective does not require extensive translation. Mira was beside me. That's the move I've been waiting 3 months to see, she said. I know. Does it feel different, choosing the hit instead of avoiding it? I considered that with genuine care. It feels like something I decided, I said, not something that happened to me. She was quiet. That's the whole thing, she said. That's the entire lesson. Graduation was 3 weeks later. We stood in the top 10 of our class, which still strikes me as one of the more improbable sentences I have ever had occasion to say about myself, given that for a significant portion of the academic cycle I had been assigned to waste management. The ceremony was long and formal, and conducted in 6 languages, simultaneously producing the acoustic texture of an important moment experienced through a mild headache. The commissions were read, the assignments were posted. Different ships, different sectors, different corners of a galaxy considerably larger and stranger than I had understood when I arrived. That evening, the canteen was full. Prith was there, his manipulator arms moving with the animated expressiveness of someone who had stopped being careful about taking up space. He had submitted for advanced tactical placement and been accepted. He moved through the canteen with the ease of someone who had learned at some cost that he belonged where he was. Several others had gathered cadets who had become something over the past months through the alchemy of shared difficulty and proximity and the occasional crisis that reveals character more efficiently than any formal evaluation. At some point, Prith leaned forward. "I need to understand something," he said. "You two started as everyone knows the story. And then 3 months later, you're the team that just broke the consecutive win record. How does that happen?" Mira looked at me. I looked at her. "Waste recyclers," she said. Prith blinked. "There's no metaphor there," I said. "We cleaned waste recyclers together for 3 months. It is difficult to maintain a false version of yourself when you are both elbow deep in a filtration housing that smells like structural failure." And Mira said, "You find out a lot about someone by what they do when no one with authority is watching, and there's no benefit to doing the right thing." Prith considered this with the serious attention he brought to most things. "That seems like a hard way to learn it." "Most things worth learning are," I said. The table was quiet in the way that happens when something true has been said, and the people present are deciding whether to let it be true or dilute it with more words. They let it be true. Later, when the canteen had mostly emptied and the station had settled into its late cycle quiet, Mira and I walked back toward the dormitory levels for the last time. The corridors looked the same as they always had, fluorescent, metal, carrying the composite smell of hundreds of species and decades of use. But they felt different in the way that familiar places feel different, when you know you are leaving them, not changed, just more themselves than before, as if your attention has finally become exact enough to see what was always there. We reached the fork, the place where our corridors diverged. We had stood here dozens of times over the past months, and the standing here had accumulated meaning in the way that repeated moments do quietly without announcement. "I have a question," I said. "Okay." "The gymnasium, the unsanctioned match. You had time to avoid that hit." "I have watched the footage enough times to be certain." I looked at her. "I know the strategic reasoning now. I understand what you were trying to prevent. But I want to know, was there a moment where you almost didn't, a version of that decision, where you stepped back and let it miss?" She was quiet for long enough that I thought she might not answer. "Yes," she said finally. "About half a second before it happened, there was a version where I moved and let you miss and let the whole thing play out into something much worse." She paused. "I didn't choose that version because somewhere between the classroom and the arena and that gymnasium, you stopped being a strategic problem to me. You became a person I was trying to help. And you can't help someone by letting them fall all the way down when you can stop it at some cost to yourself." The corridor was very quiet. "My people have a concept," I said, "for the debt owed to someone who does something costly for your benefit without being asked and without calculating what they might receive in return. It cannot be repaid. It can only be carried." "Zarak!" "I will carry it," I said. "That is not a burden. It is an orientation, a direction to move toward." I paused. "I think that is what you were trying to teach me. That honor is not a position to defend. It is a direction to move in." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Not the way she had in the arena after our first match, the automatic social gesture I had not known what to do with. This was different, deliberate, the weight of a closing that is also an opening. I clasped it. Her grip was exactly as strong as I had come to know it was. "Don't get killed out there," she said, an achievable goal. "And if you need backup, I will call," I said, "and you will answer." "And I will answer," she agreed. She let go. She turned. She walked away down her corridor, and I watched her go the way you watch something you have the particular luxury of not needing to hold on to, because it is already part of you, already incorporated into how you see things, and distance cannot touch that. The transport lifted off the following morning. I sat at the observation port and watched Ironspire Station recede, growing smaller, then smaller still, until it was a point of constructed light against the natural dark indistinguishable at this distance from the stars around it. My datapad chimed. A message from Mira Thane sent from her own transport departing in the opposite direction toward a sector I would not reach for months. It read, "Don't get killed out there. I haven't finished figuring you out yet." I read it twice. Then I looked out at the dark, at the extraordinary and indifferent vastness of a galaxy I had arrived thinking I understood, and I thought about everything the past months had actually been. Not a punishment, not a detour. A lesson delivered in the only language that actually works, the language of consequence and proximity, and the education you receive from someone who refuses to let you remain exactly what you were. My crest held the color that had appeared in that corridor outside Areth's office the night we intervened for Prith. The color I had no name for, that had no name in any Talonran record, because it had never existed in me before this station, before these months, before a woman who kept demonstrating, without announcement, without credit, exactly what the hardest kind of strength looks like. I had come to Ironspire Station knowing how to fight. I had learned at considerable and necessary cost what fighting was actually for. Some debts cannot be repaid. They can only be carried forward into the next moment, the next choice, the next time something asks what you are actually made of. I carried it, outward, into whatever was waiting. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the question.